So we're starting a little bit late, but that's okay. Filipino time. So my name is Charmaine. If we've never met or never crossed paths on Instagram or in real life, my name is Charmaine, and I'm at Holding Space, and I do a series of interviews called the Soul Explorer Spotlight, and I haven't done it in a while. But basically, the purpose of this series of interviews is to spotlight people who I know who do the brave work of exploring, doing soul exploration, excavating their experience and transforming themselves. So let me see. So today's guest, so I haven't done it in a while, but today's guest is Joanne of Go Fit Joe. And I've known Joanne for a while, although we've only met like a handful of times. And I've followed her over the years, and I've always felt a strong connection to her. And I know it sounds kind of like stalkerish or creepy, but I've always felt a strong connection to her. And so over the years, we would just randomly cross paths. And the last time I saw her was about a month ago, and I saw her at a hair appointment. And, we caught up and exchanged stories, and we caught up. And so the topic of doing a follow-up Akashic Record reading for her came up. And so I did one for her. And it kind of snowballed into me doing readings for her whole family. So in doing her readings, it's kind of opened up a lot of connections, and she's doing some real deep work. So let me bring her on. Let me add her on here. Okay, here we go. Okay. Let's see. Okay, there she is. Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so if nobody's heard of you, I will let you introduce yourself, although I highly doubt that nobody's heard of you. So I will let you introduce yourself.
I totally hate introducing myself.
Me too, but I want you to own your story.
For sure.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Hey
Tell
guys.
us who you are.
Hey guys, what's up? My name is Joanne Encarnacion. Most people know me as Joe. I'm the content creator and editor behind Go Fit Joe, and I'm also a women's health and life coach. I'm from the Bay Area, and I mostly focus on wellness and wholeness, self-love, and all that good stuff that really allows us to work inwards when it comes to working with clients and really kind of getting there to where they need to go. Sorry, I just needed to put this somewhere so I could free up my hands.
Yeah. So I followed you over the years. I think I first met you when I went for a haircut, when you're still a hairstylist, and over the years, you've evolved into like this multi-dimensional being, which we all are, but you've grown so much over the years. And I think a couple of years ago, you were at a transition point, I think, like with your job.
Yeah.
And that's when I started doing readings.
Right.
And I offered to do a reading for you.
Yeah.
And so what can you describe a little bit about, that time in your life, and what was your transition into spirituality, if since we're talking about soul exploration?
For sure. So I think those are like two parts. Let's kind of like dive into, I guess, the transition of where I was in the fall of 2016.
Yeah.
When I connected with you, I think I had just I'd come back from speaking at my very, very first women's retreat. And that was an amazing and incredible experience for me, because it was kind of an eye-opener and a realization that this is my purpose. This is my purpose in life in terms of connecting with women and really kind of giving them space and permission to rediscover or discover their most authentic selves. And how that came about was my own evolution in my own wellness journey, so to speak. About 5 years ago was the start of my health journey. And that started because I was dealing with depression and anxiety from just being overworked and overwhelmed, like most Bay Area people are. And I had no idea really that the cause of my anxiety and depression was the lack of self-care and the lack of putting myself first. And so that kind of kick-started the entire like Go Fit Joe journey in terms of really defining what healthy living meant to me and discovering myself through that process. And so fall of 2016 was interesting. I had an opportunity to do my first like speaking gig, and my first speaking gig happened to be on health and wellness, which was just kind of wild considering I was in the art and tech industry. Hi, Chrissy. Sorry, my friend just jumped on.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, that was my first speaking gig. I was super nervous about it. Here I was talking to a bunch of strangers and women I didn't know about my wellness journey, about my anxiety and depression, about my disconnection with my husband, how all these pieces in my life were due to the fact that I just did not take care of myself. And it was also during that retreat where I experienced my, I guess, first encounter with like an energy reader or like an energy healer. And, you know, it was really funny about that experience because one of the things that I remember her telling us during like our speaker dinner was, I can see truth, and truth to me looks like white that comes out of people's mouths, and they're pure. And if you're lying, there's a bunch of like polka dots or holes in it. And so when she told me that, I was like, well, let me just be honest with you then, because if you know that I'm lying, then I'm going to tell you that I don't know if I 100% believe in this like spiritual energy woo-woo shit. And she just was like, thanks for being honest. And I'm like, I'm just keeping it real. And you know, that was a really funny thing I think for me to admit, because growing up, I was raised Catholic. The whole like spirituality connected to Mother Earth and all these things, and like we're all one with the planet, was something I think innately inside was something I believed in and something I knew was the truth. But here we are programmed as Filipino Americans to believe that like your Catholic upbringing and God and Jesus and all that stuff are the highest beings there. And although I still, you know, believe in like a higher being, I think there's harmony in believing that your spirituality can define on based on like what your own belief systems are. And so I remember that experience with her, and I was thinking like, holy shit, this woman just like brought up all these like truths about me. And one of the biggest things that I remember during that experience was she had told me that I am no longer connected to my work in tech, and that is not the job that I'm supposed to be doing. And I remember when she said that, I thought to myself, I've never verbally acknowledged that to anybody. I was burned out for sure, but I had never necessarily vocalized that I believe that there's something more than just like working in that world for me. And so the funny thing when she said that to me was about 2.5 weeks later, I was laid off of my job.
Perfect.
And I was like, well, then I guess this is an opportunity for me to go back to school and really kind of see what my potential could be. And so I left my job, or I was forced to leave my job, and I decided to go back to school for health and nutrition, and got my certification as a health and nutrition coach at that time. And I went to go seek you out because I remember you were saying that these were certain, like this whole Akashic soul reading was something that you were doing. And I'm like, okay, let me just get a second witness to some of the things that were when you started doing like our readings, there was a lot of things that came up that I was like, whoa, like this kind of makes sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
This makes a lot of sense as to what we're discovering during this process.
Yeah. It, in some ways, sorry, it cut out for me. My video paused, so I
That's
missed
okay.
like the last 30 seconds of what you said. But just kind of like going back to um, your story, I feel like there's a lot in a lot of ways. Like I said, we've only met a handful of times,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel a strong connection to you because I feel like our stories mirror each other in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
When the reason why I got into spirituality was the kind of like body image too, is because I lost weight a long time ago, and then something like a spark went out in me. And so
Mm-hmm.
in my quest for, to find this spark again, I tried everything. I exercised, I dieted, I did all the things that were healthy, trying to make myself feel well again. So it's about wellness, feeling
Mm-hmm.
well. But none of it happened. None of it did it for me.
Yeah.
And so I found this email for like a psychic reading. And like you, when I first went there, I was like, is this real? She
Right.
probably Googled a lot of stuff, and so I was really skeptical, but she did say that, I was very closed,
Yeah.
and that she said once I opened myself up, she said I could be highly intuitive.
Right.
So that was my, and it kind of resonates with your story too of, like that discomfort or, self-care and wellness, just so our life experiences give us discomfort, I feel,
Right.
to kind
Right.
of redirect us to look within.
Right.
So I think a lot of us, that turning point, is different for all of us, but it takes that discomfort,
Yeah. Yeah.
to look within. And so again, that strong connection with you there, and I don't know, I feel like you're an alternate version of me in a lot of ways.
I
And
mean, we have
so
similar, like, asymmetrical haircuts going on right
yeah.
now.
Or even and even in the ways that you are strong, like your strengths are, I feel like, are my, I don't want to say weaknesses, but I feel like like you are very determined. And so seeing that in you and how you share yourself, I feel like is a mirror for me. And so when I read that you were going through, this transition, that's why I was called to share that with you. And again, at that time I was just starting out. So I was just sharing, and
Yeah.
exploring this new thing that I learned. So
Right.
I'm glad that, it resonated with you,
Yeah.
the reading. Yeah.
I remember the
And
first time that you also like messaged me. You were like, "This is weird, but I had a dream about you, and I'm not trying to be weird."
yeah.
And I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
no, it's totally cool." Like,
Yeah.
I've had people like tell me little messages, and I'm so always open to that because
Hmm.
I think one of the things that I've also realized about myself from like a long, long, long time ago was that
Hmm.
I get little blips of like deja vu, and they
Hmm.
come in like dreams, and they're
Hmm.
never full.
Hmm.
But I do believe in synchronicity, and I believe that
Hmm.
like the universe is, you have a certain, there is a destiny put out there for you.
Hmm.
And I believe that regardless of the destiny and regardless of destination, you still have the ability and power of choice and
Yes.
power of manifestation and manifesting your own ability to like shape and shift your path.
Hmm.
But there's there's already a path already laid out for you. It's just a matter of
Hmm.
like, well, are you going to choose whatever road you're going to choose to get to that particular area? And
Yes.
so I remember
Hmm.
like being younger, having these like dreams that were just deja vu's, and it wasn't
Hmm.
like oh my god, this place was familiar. It was very
Hmm.
much so I have lived this exact moment already, and it was always
Hmm.
like maybe 2 or 3 seconds. um
Hmm.
and so it wasn't until like spiritual healers like yourself or soul
Hmm.
readers like yourself came along into my life where I was like, oh, that makes sense, because
Yeah.
I know that I'm living in alignment with my intention, and I'm
Hmm.
living in alignment with my purpose, and that's these are these like these deja vu moments are
Confirmation.
Almost like confirmations. Yeah, exactly. Confirmations that that is the path that I'm going towards. So it's always like, it's always interesting when they start coming in hot in a dream. That you get one plan for the other. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, being Filipino and Catholic. I was raised Catholic too, but, I've always questioned. Once you got into spirituality, did you have any trouble, I guess? Not trouble, but, was there like a dissonance that you had to resolve in terms of reconciling your past beliefs, maybe your culture, with this new kind of way of seeing yourself, or,
I mean,
spirit?
I think, I think I've always been kind of a rule breaker, and kind of a rebel of my own cause. And so when it came to certain beliefs, especially Catholic upbringing, there were just a lot of things and a lot of rules that I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why I don't understand, like, for me, and for some people who are listening to this, I know that, there are certain, what are those, rituals in religion that people might follow. Like, what is that thing when you ask for forgiveness?
Oh, confession?
Confession, yes. So, like, I remember the first time when, I was going through confession, or, whatever that religious thing was with Catholicism and your whole CCD thing. I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't understand, if I have a direct connection to God because I'm supposed to be like a child of God, why am I confessing my sins to a priest first and then getting a message from God that way? Like, that to me was the first time I remember, like, this doesn't make sense to me growing up. And so I think, like, the way that I've always believed, or the way that I've always seen religion, so to speak, I've always challenged it growing up. And so when I guess in a way, like, defined what spirituality meant to me and what it looked like to me, I felt more at peace with myself that this was something that made sense to me. The one thing that I didn't really do was, like, I guess I never, like, came out to my family and said, like, well, I don't really believe in, like, what your belief systems are. Here's my belief systems, mostly because they have their strong opinions on it, and I respect their strong opinions, and I respect their, their way of thinking. It's just not something I need to own. If it's not something I believe in, like, I never felt like I needed to own that or keep that for myself. And I've always believed that I can honor what my upbringing was without necessarily completely destroying it or disrespecting it while I pave my own path.
Yeah. So you're still kind of honoring their choice to believe in what they believe in while you're doing yours. And I think that's easier. That's easier too, since you have your own family. So there's this, you're kind of separate. You have a separate identity already. So you're free to explore that. Yeah. And did, you mentioned already that, you have this kind of innate knowing or understanding of, nature, and kind of like how there is a connection with God, a direct connection with God. But as you explored spirituality more, maybe through the reading or, other experiences, was there any change in your perception of yourself or the world? Like any, like, complete, like, shifts that was just like, oh, like it changed your worldview, I guess?
I think the biggest thing for me was that I've always grown up with this sense that I didn't belong, and I always grew up feeling like, damn, like, where is my people? In a sense, like, I always kind of grew up feeling alone, even when I was in high school and middle school. And I think, not only was that because of just my life experiences growing up and being young and kind of living a lot of, like, darkness in my life, but I think, I just always felt a little different, and a little unique, in a sense that I was able to see things for the way that they were. And I guess what I mean by that was, you know, one of the things that like was always told to me in high school was, God, Joanne, you're always so blunt. Like you just, you know, you call people out on their bullshit, and you don't take like anyone's answer for anything. And, you know, got me in trouble quite a bit with like trying to manage relationships because I just didn't I didn't want to fit in. I didn't want to conform, right? And so you know, I think understanding some of these pieces from me from like the soul readings that you provided me gave me a better understanding to kind of accept myself and accept that these are just pieces of me, and this is something that is who I am on a like DNA soul level. And so when I came to understanding that this is just how I am in a sense, it gives me a better sense of like grounding and peace within myself to be like, right, okay, cool. Like I clearly think a different way, and that's totally okay. And I don't need to convince anybody that this is a right way or wrong way. That's not necessarily what it is. It's just I think differently, and I'm going to have different point of views from people, and that's 100% okay. So I think what it's taught me is a better sense of self-acceptance for myself, but also acceptance of other people, which is so much more, you know, I don't know. It's just, it feels so much better now, you know?
Yeah. Well, what's surprising for me, like I haven't done these readings, you know, forever. It's not like I grew up knowing how to do these things. So once I started doing the readings for myself and for other people, it did give me a sense of peace because, you know, like seeing these parts of myself that I used to judge, you know, because, you know, we're taught, you know, a lot of us are taught we're supposed to be one certain way is the right way to be.
Right.
And I was doing that too, because even when I started getting into spirituality, I was telling my honey, I'm like, you need to do this, you need to do that to be spiritual.
Totally.
And, you know, so even in spirituality, there's still some kind of dogma for people where, you know, people enforce one way of being. But in terms of when I started doing these readings and seeing, you know, everybody's gifts and, you know, all these different gifts. And sometimes one person's gift is somebody's weakness, kind of like, you know, thus it gives that sense of peace that, you know, what I used to judge as weaknesses for myself is actually my strengths and my gifts, and is part of my lesson to learn. And so, you know, it kind of, even though it doesn't make life easier or better, it gave me an appreciation of, okay, this is part of my journey. Let me just sink into this experience instead of trying to judge it and change it.
Right.
Yeah. And and for other clients too, you know, it kind of gives them that sense of relief, like, I can breathe. I can settle into who I've always felt like was true, instead of feeling like, you know, like there's always this outer judgment and this other way of being that you need to be.
Right.
So I'm glad that you know, you felt that through the reading.
Yeah.
And going back to the reading, we went over your divine gifts. So, you know, part of the reading is explaining people's gifts. Do you feel like, you know, I guess in the reading, what was the most surprising thing that we covered, I guess, that was like, what? And
oh my God, there's so many things. I actually think understanding where my soul was from was kind of unique, and I think it was like an oh shit moment, because it made sense to me to understand that I was like, oh, my soul comes from Hadar, which is like a planet in a different like galaxy or solar system, and they are people who believed in unconditional love. And when I think about all the like darkness that I've experienced growing up, which was abuse in my household, rape, suicide, you know, all this shit basically that was bottled up in my family and in my upbringing, it made me realize why I can look at all of the pain that was experienced from other people and say, you know what, I'm gonna still love you. I'm going to love you from a distance, and I'm going to give you unconditional love, but you do not need to be part of my life right now, and you do not need to enter my space, and you do not need to, like, fuck with my shit, but I can still love you. And I think a lot of times, like, you know, that entire thought process for some people is so jarring, because they're just like, how can you love someone that causes you that much pain? And I'm like, well, how can I not? Because they're also just another being trying to navigate this world, and we're fucking humans. So unfortunately, our job is to make mistakes and learn from them and learn from one another, and hopefully, like, be better people in the process of learning from each other's journeys and each other's stories. But you know, yeah, like, I think it was crazy for some people to, like, say to me, how can you still love your brother when he used to hit you? And I'm like, because he's still my brother, and, you know, he loves my children unconditionally. And yes, I understand that that's hard, but that was a past. That was a blip in my lifetime with him. And I'm still going to love him, and I'm still going to care for him. But that doesn't mean that I need to exercise the same type of love that I might provide my life partner or my children or my closest friends or my chosen family. I can love him in a different capacity that still feels like me. We're getting some questions here. How do you deal with looks or judgments of other parents or kids or teachers with your piercings and tattoos? Can I answer that really quick?
Yeah, sure. I think that's part of, you know, love, you know, and self-love. So yeah.
For sure. So I've had this tattoo actually since I was like 19. This was my first one growing up, 1920. And Iris was born when she was 21, so I had tattoos. I should probably dig up some photos of me with all my colored hair and different piercings throughout the last several decades, but I've always had them. And in the beginning, when I remember bringing her to school, I felt the need to, like, cover up my tattoos because I was going to get judged by other mothers, or having them think, like, oh my God, this woman is, like, I don't know, some crazy ass person with tattoos and can't care for her kids. And I think in terms of the judgment, I had to basically shut that off, because I was giving more power to that piece of judgment than my own power of being an amazing mother. And so the moment that I was able to recognize my truth of, I am a badass mom, regardless of my tattoos or piercings or what I look like on the outside, and I love my children unconditionally with my entire being, then I was able to shut down the judgment of other people. And it's very difficult to shut off that judgment, and it's obviously easier said than done. But I think the biggest thing is understanding your truth and sticking that into the ground right next to you, and, like, owning that as hard as you can. Because, you know, if people were to judge me based on my outer figure of, like, my tattoos and my piercings, and tell me or create the story in their head that I'm not like a good mom or whatever, or they're going to judge me for whatever purpose, then that takes away from my own power and my own truth of being the best mom that my kids have, which is what this is at the moment, despite what I look like on the outside. And so that's how I dealt with that. I hope that answered that question. And I also live in the Bay Area, where, you know, men wear skirts sometimes. So I think I live in an area that is a little bit more open to the diversity of what a mother could potentially look like.
Yeah. And that's why I love sharing these readings, because again, you know, once people can feel comfortable in their truth, a lot of times you know, you become unfuckable. You know, that term where, you know, once you know and you can kind of validate what you felt all along, before anybody else told you how you should be, then you can move with confidence, you know, like you can move with grace, knowing and trusting your own self, divine being, you know, and and it, part of one of the readings that I do as a soul realignment is, and I'm glad that you talked about judgment and taking away energy from being your truest self, is because in the readings that I do, we talk about blocks and restrictions.
Right.
So innately, we are all divine beings, which is the purpose of the main purpose of why I do these readings is to help people realize that they are a divine creator.
Yeah.
And all these judgments, all these other things that take us away from being who we truly are is what prevents us. It's a choice. It's a choice to buy into other people's thoughts or other distractions. So even if people throw judgments at you, throw rumors at you, and tell you what to do, ultimately, and this is also another reason why I want people to be aware of this, is so they can have that ownership of their experience, is that, we are all responsible for experience. So the whole world can be angry at you, can judge you, but if you know and you're secure in your knowing of yourself as a divine being, as a divine, as an expression of the divine, and you are here for a purpose, then all of that kind of fades away.
Right.
And you're not giving away your power. You're not giving away your energy that will take away from your experience of yourself. So I'm glad that question came up and that you beautifully addressed it, because that's a real life example of how we give away our power and what blocks us from expressing ourselves. So speaking of blocks, so the first reading that we did, like we went over blocks and restrictions. Was there, for some people it's confronting, because like I said, these readings that I do, they're not like, oh, you're a princess, you are, it's not like you are love and light. I mean, we are love and light, but it also, with a soul realignment, it also puts in your face the ways that you have been responsible for your experience of suffering or your experience of stuckness. What was your experience of, like hearing about blocks or restrictions? And that's also one of the parts of the reading that sometimes some people have trouble connecting with.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to past life stuff. Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's, I know that in our recent reading, there was like a block, or an incident where like I gave away my soul at a certain age. I think it was like 8. And so I'm still trying to actually dive in and figure out what that is. But that I think was just an interesting thing for me, because there were incidents that happened to me when I was younger, but in my head, I have a complete different timeline of what that is. And so in the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to, I think it's been coming up. It's been coming up in different forms, and it's been coming up in different ways, and it's been showing up for me in different processes. And so that's been kind of interesting to see and feel and to work through, because it's one of those things where you're like, well, how can I be my fullest self really quick if I have these things that are blocking me, if I have these like, energetic blocks that like need to get released. And so that I think is just interesting. And there were some interesting ones that like you did for me and John, which I just thought was even more fascinating, because that directly correlates to like our relationship and how we navigate our relationship. And so those ones in particular were probably the most interesting to me, and ones that were like, not a slap in the face, but like, oh, that's something to be very aware of. Like this particular blockage in the way that we flow as two souls is something that we should be very well aware of, so that we can keep our relationship flowing in the way that it's supposed to be moving.
Yeah. So speaking of, you and John, so we did in addition to your individual soul realignment reading, we ended up doing relationship readings for you guys. And again, I thank you for asking for that, because I stopped offering that like a year ago, because nobody asked for it. So I'm like, okay, let me just take it off my website. So you calling it out of me again. And, like it kind of reminded me, I'm like, oh, this is so fun to do.
Oh my God, it was so fun.
And yeah. So again, thank you for reactivating that in me.
Yeah,
But
of course.
how was that experience for you guys? For at least for you and John?
Yeah. Well, it was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give like some of context to the people watching, like John and I have been together for 17 years now. And we have been married for 10. And so it has been one hell of a journey to be with somebody for that long.
And longer.
And longer. Multiple lifetimes.
Yeah.
And so, it was, we have been working really hard in terms of just our relationship as of the last couple months, because when you're with someone for that long, there are going to be moments where you're so freaking over them. And that's part of it, that's part of this entire process of learning and growing as individuals and together as a unit. And this was the second time, I think, in our 10-year marriage that, second time last fall in our 10-year marriage that it was like, okay, wait, are we separating? Like, is this the only solution? Because we're hitting another roadblock that we can't seem to drive over on our own. And so we went back to therapy, which has been super amazing, but also we both had to speak our truths about our relationship of where it was at. And the biggest truth that got brought up was, I'm no longer in love with you. Which is, kind of a slap in the face to like anybody to hear that. And when that truth came up, and this is why I believe so hard, like this is why I like put all my faith in saying that truths, even though as hard as they are, they need to be spoken and they need to be said, because it frees us up as like spiritual beings to move freely within our bodies and to really figure out how to realign like our lives in order to navigate these truths. But yeah, like when that truth came up, it was like, okay, it's time to do some work here. Let's really kind of figure this out. And so we're at such a much better place now based on like therapy, opening up with one another, learning how to openly communicate with one another. When I remember like talking about soul readings and like wanting to see if you did them for relationships, and you're like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. I was like, let's do that, because I just want to see, like, I want to see if we're meant to be together. B, if there's any blocks in our like relationships, and like C, almost like confirmation of like, is this the right path? And not that I throw all my eggs in a basket with like energy readers or, psychic readings or anything like that regarding relationships. But I also think that there is someone out there who's putting people in your paths for a purpose and for a reason. So when we did our soul reading with you, it was actually really funny to hear certain things. We've had how many like John and I have had how many lifetimes together? This is our third one.
Third or fourth. Yeah. And then you guys were colleagues in one of them. So I'm like, oh, that's so cool, because you guys are colleagues now. Like a deeper level of working together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that I think was just like interesting. And I think there was also like we were family at one point, which I thought made so much sense, because there are times where and I don't want to generalize this, right? But I think there are so many times as women that we're like, fuck, am I raising another child? Like within my partner? Like, am I really like mothering this person? And it made so much sense when you were like, well, you guys were family at one point. Like, he was a niece and you were the aunt or something like that. And I was like, oh, that makes sense as to why I'm constantly guiding him then. And when I learned that piece within our relationship, I was like, well, I guess I'll always be the nurturer, and I can be okay with that. Like, I can be okay with that, because we've had past experience of having that type of dynamic in our relationship. And so again, like, that was me making peace with this, like, oh my God, I have to really parent this person, or like, I am the adult here in this context of things. And it's not always the case. Like, he is an amazing adult and an amazing individual, and he's, doing his own thing and growing and evolving as well.
Yeah.
So that's been truly freaking amazing. But I think the soul readings also gave us a better understanding of like what our lessons are for one another.
Yeah.
Another question for both relationships. What's the best way not to lose yourself with having a spouse that has I'm assuming that says addiction. Is that addiction is what you're referring to? I'll wait till they answer.
Like that.
Well, I think in terms of like, losing your, yeah, okay, perfect. Cool. Thanks for clarifying. So in terms of not losing yourself in a relationship, I think that takes a lot of work. Like, so, I mean, and a lot of work in knowing who you are as an individual, and B, understanding that that relationship, no relationship defines your identity as a person. And what I mean by that is like, yes, I am someone's life partner. Yes, I am someone's mother. Yes, I am someone's daughter. But my whole being does not rest on that responsibility of that relationship being something that needs to be a part of my life in order for me to feel whole. And that's a huge thing. And how I guess I got to that, truth was knowing myself in the process and knowing which parts of myself I wanted to keep as myself, like who is Joe in this, who is Joe before she enters this relationship, and what are the parts of Joe that needs to stay intact as she navigates through this relationship. And I think like that might be the question you need to ask yourself in terms of, maybe navigating this relationship with any partner or spouse that has an addiction is, what are these pieces of yourself that you want to keep and hold safe and secure, and how do you hang on to that? What are those things? And for me, the things that allow me to feel like my best version of self happens to be self-care, meditation, movement, exercise, freedom, autonomy, being able to like have a career that's, solely my own. And also being able to like have my friendships. And so, understanding like values of what it means to be yourself as a person before you enter a relationship is going to be super valuable and important for you to define for yourself, so that you're not losing those pieces of yourself with any relationship, regardless of whether or not your spouse or partner has an addiction. I hope that helps. We can go on and on and on about that. I can go on and on about staying true to yourself in a relationship.
I wanted to speak to that too, is because, again, being secure in your knowing of yourself and knowing who you are helps protect your energy. And I think, I don't know if you had one of those, that's another block too, is, obviously we want to help. We want to help others. We want to, when we see somebody hurting, we want to make that other person not hurt, maybe. Or, and again, I don't remember if it was in your reading, but there's something called compassionate connections. And, each person is a divine being. We have access to, we all have the same access to infinite intelligence, infinite love, infinite wisdom. We are all sovereign divine beings. And so when you, again, it's good to help others, but not in a way that disempowers them, because some people might take the savior role where like, I'm going to save you and come here, and then it becomes an attachment, because and then it can also be a block, because then your attachment to being the savior, to playing this role for somebody else, one, it takes away from that other person's divinity and power by you taking on this responsibility. And it's also draining for you, because then your attention goes away from doing what you're here to do, to carrying responsibility and doing the work for somebody else who is capable. So if you are going to help, or if you have, somebody you love who is, struggling, it's best to help in a way that empowers the other
The other
person.
person. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not in a way where you're like, oh, give me all your burdens and I will take care of it. I will
Totally.
fix your problem for you. And it's kind of like kids too, helping them with homework.
Right.
It's best to show them, not to give them the answer, but to help them understand how to
Right.
get to the answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
So,
the other thing is recently,
mhm,
John and I discovered this quote that now like
mhm,
is something that we embody our whole
mhm,
beings with, which is
mhm.
I want to support your growth and happiness. And I
Yes.
remember
Mhm,
reading that, thinking to myself,
mhm,
that's exactly the type of way I want to show up in love with anybody in my
mhm,
life. I want to be there to support their growth and happiness, but I am not responsible for their growth and happiness. And when I was able
mhm.
to recognize that truth, that's when I was able to say, right, that's not my responsibility to make you happy.
Yes. Mhm.
But it's my choice to support that. And how can I
Yes.
support that? And
Mhm,
once I was able to recognize that I have the ability to support that and it's not my responsibility to provide that,
mhm.
that was the biggest switch for me. And I think
Yeah.
kind of going back a little bit, that was one of the things that you said to me about my own reading was like,
Mhm,
as my soul being from like Hadar, I
mhm,
have a tendency to want to love on people until I am fully
mhm.
exhausted of my own love for
Yes.
myself.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that is something that I've recognized that I do from time to
mhm,
time. And I still have a terrible tendency of doing that, but I'm learning to be
mhm,
better. And in
mhm,
recognizing and having awareness in that, it allows me to go, okay, am I loving? Am I pouring out love too much in some area in my life
mhm,
more than I am pouring into my own self?
mhm,
And so that just gives me kind of an ability to recalibrate how I approach my relationships or how I approach my
mhm.
daily experiences.
Yeah. And like self-love too, filling, that I know this it's cliche now, but filling your own cup before
Right.
you can pour into others. Because if your cup is empty, like it doesn't serve you and it
Right.
doesn't serve the person that you're trying to help because you're coming from a place of being drained instead of
Totally.
coming from a place, where you feel
Of
fulfilled. And
wholeness.
again,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to emphasize that I'm not saying don't help others, but do it in a way that feels fulfilling to you.
Totally.
If your calling is to serve people and it fills you up and it brings out creativity in you to come up with ways to help other people, that's
Right.
awesome. But if
Yeah.
it's in a way, again, where you're carrying burdens for other people and you're exhausted and you're drained and
Right.
you're doing it out of obligation maybe and not even out of love or
Right.
joy, that is a different uh, energy. There's nothing
Totally.
inherently good or bad. It's your intention. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because
Right.
of guilt,
Right.
obligation?
Right.
Even if it's the same action, it's the feeling or the intention behind it that drives the result, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
so
I mean,
yeah.
you can't love out of obligation. Like
Yeah.
loving out of
Hmm.
obligation just sounds so, I don't know, just
Contradictory.
for I don't well, yeah, that too, and at least for me it just sounds dirty. Like it doesn't sound
Yeah.
free, and I don't know,
Hmm.
I think we all have the ability to choose, and I think
Yes.
that's our gift is that we have choice.
Hmm.
And so, I always like to say I choose to love people in a certain way. I choose to like allow you
Hmm.
into my life, and I choose to be present for you, and that should be a gift. It shouldn't be
Hmm.
a well, I'm 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 obligated to be present. I'm
Hmm.
obligated to give you my time. Like that just does not sound healthy to me. So
Yeah. And so I think you mentioned, I think in one of your posts, like when you and John were rediscovering each other, is, you know, the freedom when love is liberating instead of confining or
mm-hmm,
instead of, being possessive.
mm-hmm.
I think that's the real true expression of love, not
Yeah,
this like, oh, you're mine,
right.
like possessive. It's very confining. So
Yeah,
liberating love is the more expansive
yeah, yeah,
expression
yeah,
of love. And, I find that in my relationship too, is that
yeah.
when I feel free, when I feel free to be myself, to do the things that I love. And there was a point too, because me and my husband, we've gone through ups and downs too. We've gone through several times where we're like, okay, this is it. We are going separate ways. I can't see us together. But for me, it was in the moment when he was willing to let me go. Like, you know what? If this is going to make you happy, I'm willing to let you go. And that's when I was like, oh my God, he loves me so much that he is willing to let me go.
Right.
Then we got even closer because I'm like, wow, that is like real love. That he is willing to, I don't want to say sacrifice his happiness, but sacrifice this comfort of a relationship that we've known. He's willing to sacrifice that for my happiness. Was really like, wow, that is like the ultimate expression of love for me.
Right.
And so,
well, I mean, I think it's not necessarily sacrificing his happiness. I think what it is like he's letting go of this idea of like this picture of what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to be. And I think that post that you're referring to, I think my exact words was, true love is when you can be home and feel liberated at the same time. And that, I think, is like, speak of the devil.
Hi, John.
That I think is the ultimate love, right? Because you can feel safe and secure in that love, and also feel free at the same time. Somebody says, wait, can you say that again? Yes. So my quote, I think the words that I had said was, true love is when you can feel at home, and feel liberated at the same time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that goes for self-love too, because a lot of times we are looking for home in somebody else or somewhere else, but we're home and we're free in our own being as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's beautiful. And so now that and we also did relationship readings for your kids and how you guys are connected as a family. How is that?
I'm like, hey kids, I'm gonna get your souls read.
How is that as a parent?
You know what? I think I personally, like as a parent, I think it's incredible to see your kids like soul makeup and then be like, right, that makes a lot of freaking sense. You know, for those who don't follow me, if you guys ever catch me on like just IG stories and my kids are around, you guys will probably see a lot of what I'm talking about now. But Olivia, who's my youngest, she is like this self-determined, like just ball of light, and she is so full of love and so full of truth. And it's funny because, you know, one of the things that you had mentioned that her life lesson here is in this lifetime is finance, right? I think,
or like I think it's showing up right now. I think possibility or power.
Self-determination, and like there is self-determination and there is finance. And so, you know, what was interesting is not too long, like, you know, she's becoming more and more aware of like money and like things costing things. And so it's really cute because she'll go, wait, so hold on, my birthday bowling party is $15 a person and I'm inviting 20 people. That's a lot of money. Are you sure that's okay, Mom? Like, and it's just so funny because I'm like, this is a 9-year-old and why is she asking about money, you know? Or I remember when we were in New York and we went ice skating for the first time. She's never gone ice skating, and it was amazing to watch her. Like, this little girl was determined to skate on the ice all by herself. It didn't matter how many times she fell on the ice. It did not matter like what the hell happened. I mean, we were on that rink for about 3 hours, and the last 20 minutes she was like, just let me go, Mom, I'm gonna try this on my own. And just watching her, just like watching her determination. And she's always been like this. And so to hear that, like to see that piece out of her soul reading for me as a parent was, you know what? I'm going to allow her to explore this self-determination out of her, and I am not going to disrupt that, because clearly this is something that is part of her that she is going to fight me with no matter what. So I'm just going to let her do her thing. And it's beautiful, you know, it's so beautiful to see. And then for my teenager, who's 14, seeing and knowing that like part of her soul is, or she has like an underlay of Hadar, which is like where my soul is from, makes sense as to why right now, you know, teenagers always have a hard time like with friends, but it made so much sense now as to some of her like heartaches when it comes to her friendships. And for me as a parent, understanding this and understanding this is a part of who she is allows me to just be able to like hold better space for her when it comes to some of the conversations and or advice, and or to just listen to her talk about her hardships. And so seeing that or knowing that in those pieces of their soul readings just makes it so much better as a parent to navigate these little like balls of spiritual light, because then you're just like, okay, well, I'm never going to be able to parent you identically the same, because you guys are clearly two different people. But now I know, like now I actually know like what are the things about who you are that is innately who you are. And now as a parent, I'm going to try my best to just guide those a little bit better rather than like shape them, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So I wish I had that when my son was younger, because we spent a lot of time, me personally, I think I was trying to compensate for my own insecurities of being a young mom. Like, you have to be perfect because, you know, people are going to judge us. So you have to get the best grades. And so we spent a lot of time, you know, like butting heads, and I was trying to force him and micromanage him. So I wish I knew this before. Because once I did his reading, I'm like, oh, all the things I've been bugging you about is just you trying to be you, you know? Like, and so now I'm glad that, you know, time, it's not that time heals, it's like time is irrelevant. Like, even if you spend 20 years hating each other, it just takes 1 second to release that, you know, and live in this present moment and enjoy each other now. And now I love being around. I miss him, you know, like I used to hate, honestly, I used to hate being around him, but now I love, you know, like I get to enjoy him now because I appreciate who he is. Yeah. And it's kind of sad that it took a reading, you know, but, you know, a lot of us aren't connected with our intuition. So sometimes it does take a tool like this to reinforce, you know, the knowings and to help get rid of that other stuff that tries to shape our experience. So yeah. So I think it's about to like close off our live. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh my God, you're so welcome.
Yeah. And I know you're expanding and you're evolving now. So I'm looking forward to watching you grow and see. Really, like, there's a lot. There's a lot that I'm watching because I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. You're exploring so much, you know, you're breaking barriers and you really are exploring, you know, again, you're doing the brave work of sharing yourself, exploring yourself, and just being real and sharing it with other people. And for me, it's inspiring. Like I said, it triggers a lot of like self-reflection in me, you know, the posts that you share. So, so yeah, I hope it encourages other people to explore all these facets of themselves. So so as you know, like go beyond just physical fitness into mental health and spiritual, you know, well-being, and just, you know, like exploring all these levels. Again, I hope it encourages others to do the same, because I'm looking for playmates. And, you know, people to have these types of conversations with. So the more that people open up, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're not a playmate. So, so yeah, thank you for sharing, and thank you for bringing all of this stuff out for me and sparking that excitement again.
Yeah, of course. You're so welcome.